What's up, guys? It's Rob from All Things Wood, Heat, and Maple. Wanted to show you guys what I do as a backyard maple syrup maker, how I get everything ready for the boil. So you've seen my rig in other videos. This is a Smoky Lake Dauntless 20 by 48 pan. I've got guy lines going down to a cinder block over here. I also have guy lines that go into our barn. So here's how I set things up. First thing I do, you've got our evaporator out here. I make sure it's level. I've got these two levels that I use, and by level I mean front to back and side to side. If your pan is cockeyed, the high spot's going to be the first spot that boils over or burns. So you've got to be cautious of that. Once I get my pan on here, and obviously I've got my stack set up and my preheater installed, I fill the evaporator pan with 3 gallons. I use my sight glass, I measure 3 gallons. This way, when we're boiling, if this is steaming, boiling, bubbling, we can't tell how much is in there. All I have to do is look at my sight glass, and if this sap level is at that red line, I know it's 3 gallons. If it's under, I know we've got to get more sap in there to avoid an overboil or scorching the pan. Once I get the first 3 gallons in this pan, I put another 2 gallons and I bring it up to 5 gallons total. Throughout the course of the boil, I'm going to stay in between here, and I'm using these basically as guidelines on how much sap is actually in that pan. So the evaporator is set up. I've got my sap in the pan. Always a good idea to do this first so you don't forget. Light your evaporator before there's sap in the pan and ruin your day. I've got my feeder bucket, which is a 5-gallon bucket. I also have the top of one of our hanging pails there as a heat shield. Get a little bit of heat, when there's limited wind. I get some heat on the top of this bucket, and I just want to prevent any possible hassles. So I put a heat shield there. This feeder bucket has a valve, and that's how we're going to hook this up and control the amount of sap going into the evaporator pan based on what the sight glass tells us. So I'm always looking at the sight glass, always checking that out. And of course, as the boil gets hotter and faster, we can add more sap, lessen the sap, and it also gives us a good idea of how we're going to run our fire. Speaking of fire, I've got her set up. I've got the newspaper, pine, no big deal there. We run straight pine in our evaporator. I've got plenty of this stuff that falls on the property, and this is about the size we're working with. You can see my fist. It's probably at the same size or a little bit smaller. So I've found that for the Dauntless, pine burns beautifully. There's limited to no ash left over. If you use hardwoods, you might be able to get away with a mix of hardwoods, But I found when I first started using this evaporator that we would get a lot of coals built up, and they weren't throwing a lot of heat. Again, they could have been, moist wood. It could have been junk wood. But if you can, go with pine, or if you're going to use other wood, I would cut it on the smaller side. You're going to find you get a nice hot boil. Just keep feeding it and she'll do right by you. Right now we're getting anywhere from 11 to 14 gallons per hour, depending upon how much attention we need to pay to the unit. If we get to chatting and drinking coffee, sometimes we forget to fire it, and that slows down the boil. But it's an amazing unit. Not being sponsored. Every video I talk about Smoky Lake, it's all good things. I haven't had anything negative to say about these guys. Made in Michigan, I believe, and maybe it's Wisconsin. I don't know. Check them out on the website. They've got great products. I've got all my setup here ready to go. I've got my gloves, got my screwdriver, so I can get my clamp set up for our preheater. Another thing that you guys absolutely have to remember is this, the oh-you-know-what bucket. If you're boiling, or you're with anyone here, the first thing you tell them, if you see that thing boiling over or smells like caramelized sugar, you grab this bucket. Don't make it too heavy. Put a couple of gallons in there so everyone can pick it up. You dump that directly into your evaporator pan. Into the pan, not into the evaporator itself, into the pan. Other parts of your mise en place, whatever barrels you're using, having them nearby, have whatever buckets or stands you're using. I like to put my buckets on a pallet. This way, the bottoms of the bucket isn't getting all dirty and gritty. If you do have to go back into the barrel, you're not, cross-contaminating. You're just getting sand and junk in there. But basically having your area set up will make life easy. So that's pretty much what we do to get things running. At this point, if you take a look at the video, I have a link up there if you want to see how we actually fire up the preheater. What we normally do, I'll give you a quick overview, is we'll light this slow, doesn't have to be anything heavy, and while this is just warming up, I'll hook this up, I'll start running sap into it. I'm not worried about getting too much sap in this pan. It's gonna boil off. And what I do is I take a can, let's see, here it is. I'll use this can, good coffee by the way, Cafe Du Monde, and just to make sure there's no burnt sugar or anything in that tube, I'll let that sap flow through there until it gets warm, and discard whatever sap comes through. But if it looks clean, boom, we go to town, start firing the evaporator, and then it's a number of hours where that's all we do is we monitor a sight glass, we monitor the feeder bucket, and we monitor the wood, chat, drink coffee, enjoy the time, and that's what sugaring's all about. We don't use any RO, we go totally old school, sap into the evaporator, and that's it. Any questions? Leave them in the comments. Let me know where you guys are boiling, or if there's anything that I missed that you need to add. I'm happy to hear it, and definitely smash the like button. Hit the subscribe button. I'd like to get to 1,000 subscribers within the next half a year or so. I really would appreciate it, and it's free. We'll see you on the next one.